work was or what it really looked like in application. And then lo and behold, as I start to do and doing my own healing work for the last few years, I was like, oh, no wonder I want to constantly help people, because I displace my emotions into service versus actually taking care of myself, because I've been on my own for a while in terms of life circumstances and experiencing a lot of things from a young age. But not to get too deep too quickly.
We are live now.
But no, I enjoy what I do. But a lot of it does intersect with my personal story of especially the addictions side of things. So helping people understand.
There's some times where I kind of question why I think the way I certain do, or why I think the way that I do, or why I react in certain ways that I do. And I think when I started reading up on it, I was like, huh, I got issues apparently.
Yeah. No, well, welcome to the club, because we all got a little bit of something going on, and it takes one to know one. So I think that's what makes me I think I'm good at what I do, is because, I was bad at it at some point, because I just didn't realize my own connection to it. So, yeah.
Well, that's good. You recognize it, and now you can help others. That's what we do. That's what we're here.
There you go.
Welcome to Technically Speaking, where you get the news
you can use.
Oh. Look at that. I like that.
We done upgraded a little bit, Sarah, since the last time you came.
I see. And I think that is a good look for you guys.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. And thanks for joining us again. Unstoppable Season is on IG, showing love as usual. He said he's tapped in from Dallas. Oh, I want to say right down the street, but that's not right down the street. You about what? What's that, like 5, 6 hours?
4 hours.
4 hours? Okay.
4
There's
hours.
a real good taco spot out there in Dallas. I can't remember the name of it. It was really good, though. But, hey, thanks for checking in. And Sarah, thanks again for joining us. Just to remind folks, this is, I think, our 4th time having a conversation live. I believe it's number 4, because we did it the first time. We lost it, so we did it again, and then you came again, and then...
Oh, with me. I thought you guys were talking about your... Yeah, I think this, 3rd or 4th.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's getting to be a regular,
Velvet tacos? I think so. Maybe not. I don't know. But so yeah, just real quick, anyone that's checking in, you too, Unstoppable Season. So we're going through an evolution with Technically Speaking, right? We realized that some of our off-script topics kind of connected with more people. So we're actually changing it. We're still gonna talk some tech news, but we're gonna talk about just regular everyday news that you can use too. So, and that's why Sarah joined us. We got a couple of things we're gonna cover today. And we'll just jump right to it. And we asked Sarah to come because we wanted to get her insights on this first story we're about to share. So let me go ahead and get this thing going. Make sure we are sharing the audio, and let's do the thing.
A Louisiana mayor abruptly resigns from office. Then within days of her resignation, she's booked into jail, accused of raping a minor while she was in office.
It's a very serious crime, and I think that it's important that it be recognized as such.
42-year-old Misty Roberts faces charges of third-degree rape and contributing to the delinquency of juveniles. According to authorities, they began their investigation on July 26th, when the Beauregard Parish Sheriff's Office requested the Louisiana State Police Special Victims Unit investigate a complaint against the former mayor. Investigators interviewed 2 juveniles, one of which was the alleged victim. Both would confirm Roberts allegedly had sexual intercourse with the young victim while she was mayor.
It seems to be, oddly enough, that when I look at the people that I've evaluated and we look at some of the high-profile cases, it's not that this is somebody who is struggling financially, struggling career-wise, unattractive, unmarried. We tend to find people who are the opposite of that when we look at offenders. And so I don't think it's a matter of this person doesn't know better as much as it is a number of other things that are going on.
All right. So that's it for that one. So yeah. So as y'all see, we're going off into some deep stuff here, and this is why we called Sarah in. Ladies, get us going. Start the conversation. Who wants to go first?
I'm gonna just do a quick disclaimer because I am here to go deeper into my perspective. My disclaimer is I have some experience with and that intersects with law enforcement. So in criminal deviancy behavior is guilty pleasure of mine. But I'm also can't really speak to any kind of like legal terms. I can give you kind of just general knowledge of like a couple of things that I picked out watching this story, but it's not to be misconstrued with any other personal experiences of the same charges or like charges for any other person. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
yeah,
it does.
Okay, because I specifically want to say, so some of the thing, that story, that whole 10-minute video I've watched before this, and there's a lot of different activating events and words in it. And the first one that sticks out to me is the word rape. Big word. What happens? So what I usually deal with people is understanding like what activation means. I help people develop, a mindset of recovery. And so that takes going deeper to looking at your whole relationship with emotions, understanding what addiction actually means, brain science, neuroscience, all that, aka therapy. But we don't, I think, often understand, like we just hear, okay, this person was charged with rape. It's a very serious offense. It needs to be taken seriously to not disregard the law. But that also does not say very much about the circumstances as to what was done. So we're just essentially potentially fear mongering here with just that one word.
Good point. Good point. And that what you just said, right? Bobby and I, we always had this conversation a lot. And I feel like I've been having this conversation a lot since this election season. Media, they make money off of ratings, right? So the fear mongering is kind of something that fear does best, or the media does best, right? Because it catches your attention. It caught mine, right? Right, wrong, or indifferent. Couple of things stood out to me with this story, right? Not knowing the full details, to your point, Sarah, it kind of gave me some R. Kelly vibes. But switched because there was a female here. Now, I want to lay a couple of things out and hear me out. Because even if you cringed when I said R. Kelly, even when the R. Kelly thing was going down, I was like, well, hold up now. I can go back to when I was in junior high school, right? 6th grade. I had a fine teacher named Miss Haley. All the boys had a crush on her, right? And like we would all talk about, man, if you know what I'm saying, if you know, immature boy stuff, right? Now, let's just say something would have happened, right? Any one of us would have bragged about it, right? And it's not like we would have like tried to like go tell someone because we felt like we were wronged. It would have just got out and someone probably would have taken it up just because it got out from one of us bragging like, hey man, you got, let me tell you something, right? Which is definitely wrong. Let me make sure I put that out there because it's still wrong, right? Illegal against the law, but just the inner like little boy in me was like, let's switch it. And if there was a mayor that would have approached me too, what? A woman with power? So that's one thing. And then another thing I'm looking at, I wonder if you got a woman in power, which is no different than men in power that maybe go after younger women, right? Couple of things right there to unpack.
Oh, absolutely. Bobby, did you want to add something before I jump in on it?
I do. So at the end of the day, wrong is wrong. If she, I do wish, I have talked about in a previous podcast how the media is probably one of the biggest proponent enemies of America, is because you have to be really have a good spirit of discernment whenever you're reading and listening to things on the media, because they don't exactly tell you the full story. So 2 things I want to unpack. One of them is going to be the lady who was narrating that story for the Louisiana mayor. It seemed like she kind of went soft on her, but at the same time, we don't know the full context of the story. We don't know how many times this allegedly happened and why all of a sudden this young man decided to come forward when, just like you said, Geronimo, how, that's something that like a boy would dream of, right? A woman in power. It doesn't take away from it being wrong, but I'm wondering what caused him to flip. who caused him to flip, what situation did, you know what I mean? Like what happened. She had to have gotten news that he said something, which is why she resigned. You know what I mean? Before, a couple of days before those charges came in. So it doesn't make it right. Everybody should be held, man or woman. If you committed the crime, then you should do the time. So
yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you. There's a lot of things I want to unpack from this, but just to kind of, since we're on Bobby's point, is there's two things there. One, your curiosity I love, because that's really where we start to, like, you ask the question, you're more likely to go seek out an answer. You just got to be careful of the bias. And where I say the bias there would be technically, like, who's to say that the person did come forward? And because now I would have to go do a little bit more research, but 3rd degree rape is a lesser charge, usually because there's lesser evidence. And so but there may have been enough evidence to charge someone there, but not convict them. So that's where, you know, like,
so you don't
he could have potentially,
so
like,
it
could have just been someone reported it. And then there could have been enough information or just observation to be like, oh, this is an appropriate language. And then people resign when they know, like, they don't want to lose something on someone else's terms.
Yeah.
So that's where, like, it's very, very delicate when we start dealing with perception, and not only just the media from being like, but you even picked up on her tone, which kind of leads me to my second point of, like, things that pick out to me, not to disprove. This is really just, you use the best D word, is discern. Whether it be a personal opinion or fact, is that we don't have all the facts. We're sitting here watching this story through the news. That's the only option we have to learn from it. But you can also build a discernment of, like, oh, knowing your own reactions and desire to make judgments that are based off of preconceived associations and judgments that have been set probably far before you could even have an intelligent conversation about a topic like this.
Yeah.
Usually development and main associations are solidified by the age of 9. So there you're looking at preconceived notions of what are your own experiences of power dynamics. So there's your young boy that's supporting, like, statement of, like, when you're a young, immature, hormones raging boy that has no understanding of what that even means, let alone what it's doing to your brain at the same time. You're more likely to gravitate towards relationships like that, especially if they are allowed and they are reinforced. And if we are coming from an old just generational culture of, like, oh yeah, you let the person in charge do whatever they want, say whatever they want, because they pay you, and you're basically, your livelihood is on the case, or your grade if you're a student teacher dynamic. That power dynamic, like, that is fear right there. You don't feel like you can actually take up more room. And ultimately that fear, I literally actually just my group tonight was on just the relationship with fear alone, and how your prior associations that have nothing to do with the current association, it's just one emotion that ultimately reinforces your thought process and your belief system about how you operate in future situations this way. Okay.
So if the shoe was on the other foot, and let's say this was a man who was a mayor and he groomed a young lady, and we end up hearing a man running the narrative, running the story, and he's like, well, you know, this person, because of such and such trauma, happened to do this, and then it almost sounds like he's making an excuse, because it's kind of what it sounded like for this person a little bit. I was like, wait a second, are you trying to brush this under the rug?
Yeah.
Wrong is wrong, but if the shoe was on the other foot, people would be like, oh my gosh, did you hear this? And I feel like the story may have been a bit bigger than what this one happens to be.
Yeah, because this one kind of flew under the radar. It's just that we find obscure stuff to technically speak about, right? But it's not mainstream, right? If it was, I feel like, to your point, if it was a man, it would have been go at him with stakes and pickaxes and but that tone was completely different. Say what?
It would reinforce that. Yeah. It would reinforce, and I'm going to call it, it's probably an unpopular opinion, but cancel culture is like a group think dynamic. Is that as soon as you get even one hint of, like, oh, cancel. Like, and so
Yep.
where I work on the recovery and the therapeutic side is like, before you, and sometimes it's a snap judgment. And this is where people need to understand really what trauma, the impact of trauma has, not only just on your body, your life, but your decision making. It is trying to protect you, because most like we know it's like, oh no, that's wrong, don't do that.
Yeah.
But like, what is wrong is right to that person. And this is going to sound very similar to like empathy and like giving them an excuse. It's not. It's really, or at least that's not my intention. It's just to depict that if you play that later, that story on, there's a section where they interview a clinical psychologist, which is a little bit different than what I do, but they give you all the data, the research. I'm more in the interpersonal connections and healing aspect of things. But she goes to share that a third of offenders, whether that be female or male, actually have intent behind something like this. And a lot of people are just operating off of kind of autopilot, because you only know what you know. And I promise you, working with addictions, we all know drugs are bad, but it does not stop anyone from doing them.
Good point.
So sexual offenses, unfortunately, do have more of a personal relationship and ultimately just carry out that belief system of that is right. That is how they build. So this person's married. She's the mayor. She has a power dynamic. So we have all these different variables of what reinforces like what is wrong. But to her, she's likely lacking connection with herself, because she's not doesn't understand to what degree of power she actually holds being in public office. Politics are notorious for not being able to be your authentic self, because you have to cater to everyone else. So we just have a historical lineage of people not being able to promote what is right behavior. Look at Donald Trump as an example of like, we can all have an opinion on who he is, but he's not modeling behavior that we know to be right. People are just scared by what they don't know about something different, that they can't even really get past to the decision making to realize, for me to even realize I'm on a soapbox right now, that I'm like, let me, that I don't want it to make it about that particularly, but it is a trauma response. I'll just say, to kind of like, since I slowly trailed off of this one thought, go Google Stockholm syndrome. That's all. People gravitate and empathize with people, their oppressor, because that's what's familiar to them. So the same way that this person gravitated towards what was wrong was probably because it was what was influenced in her history.
Good point. Good point.
It does not mean that she's not supposed to be held accountable, because yes, we all do know it eventually. So I just had to finish that sentence.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
We know it's wrong. Like that is a child. That is what they didn't call it statutory rape. So he's not that young. So he is a minor, but there's probably less of an age difference than there is that. Again, you wouldn't really be able to pick out those if you've not worked in the legal system or done, looked for more of the specific data as to like what the charges actually do say, let alone, and this is where the court of law is not supposed to go fully into a trauma history, because it's not objective, it is subjective. But from a bystander standpoint and how this relates to the news that you can use, I like that because it rhymes. You all have kids. You don't want this to happen.
No,
what do you
not
look
at all.
for? How do you know how to build that discernment? And that's ultimately my wheelhouse, is helping people understand that process.
And so for news you can use, right? My question I asked Sarah offline, and I'm gonna ask it again, is as a girl dad, right? Because I got 3 daughters. What can I do, right, with the younger ones to like try to prevent, I guess, those type of to try to prevent that type of behavior when they grow up? Let's say one of them, they get into a place of power like that. What should I be doing right now to get the right values, et cetera, in place to where those type of thoughts don't even cross their mind, even if they get into a position of power like that later on in life?
So I didn't technically respond. You told me to say what I said in the message, but I'll expand upon it. The first thing I would say to do is you have to explore your own associations with that type of experience. It's the harder one, but I always start with the harder one. Hopefully people will follow me to it. But your own desire to do better as a parent will automatically influence in a positive way to your children and in your parenting. So you understanding, and I think if you don't mind me using this as an example, just your expression earlier of acknowledging that you were a young teenage boy that was aroused and attracted to a circumstance of being attracted to power. That's not changed regardless of generations. And I don't think it's changed between human dynamics. We all have that. We see the luxury lifestyle. We see the perception of power. It's attractive. That's how your body is supposed to respond.
Yeah.
But if you've had maladaptive experiences within that natural process of forming your belief systems and your biases and your thoughts and your feelings around that, you're going to be more likely to not be able to prevent that happening to your children. Because what I did say in the message, we can screenshot it just for proof if we really need it, was really the thing you can do is just take a look for inappropriate sexual power dynamics within your child's lifestyle, because you can't control it. I promise you, going to a private school, trying to protect and isolate your children is going to cause some other type of problem you never even intended. But knowing what to look for is the only thing that you can do to prevent. And then this is probably the worst part of my job is to say this, is you can't prevent trauma. You cannot. The bad things in life are going to happen. As careful, as scared, as preventative as you can be. The true prevention, this is what I've kind of shifted my own professional course to try to promote and help people understand. The most true prevention is how to prepare when something bad happens. How do you get back on course and recover? Understanding the central nervous system. Trauma is not what happens to you, it's what happens inside of you.
As you were saying that, I couldn't help but to remember that speech from the girls basketball coach when she was saying handle hard better. That's kind of what was formulating as you was kind of walking that out, right? Is doing that prep work on, okay, any event, a situation happens, what do you do? How do you respond? How do you recover? Is that kind of like what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to go through the things, Bobby asked me when I'm not sure if it actually went live and recorded, but like she asked me why I got into my profession. And I can't tell you how I chose it because it chose me. My answer was trauma. My unhealed central nervous system and trauma brought me to a place where helping people was very hard on me. Geronimo, you probably know more of my story, but like when you first met me, I looked completely different than I do now, right? Now I'm supposed to grow, supposed to look different, but I had to transform my life because I've already built a life around helping people. That's my passion. That's what I want to do. But if you do that with a no limit and you lose yourself in it, you become a very different person. And I became a person that I didn't have any other identity outside of that one. So I went on a journey and I just challenged some of my perspective of myself. What would I be like if I was this weight? What would I feel like if I experienced this? Doing that search and that intentional work on myself, do we get to this point where I can speak a lot more confidently, but I also expanded my own knowledge on like what trauma is. I didn't learn that in school. Everything I just said to you, I learned in my resume, the random ass jobs that I took. I was a correctional officer. I was a bus driver. The things that my ADD got me into, like, oh, that'd be interesting. Ooh, never finished anything. Learned it being a homeowner. Yes, my professional education gives me a lot of cred, but my life experience solidified that and it transformed my life.
Life is the best teacher. I like that.
And I've been traumatized along the way, but I know that trauma is it's what happens inside of me, not what happens to me.
It takes some maturity too to even realize that, oh, hey, what I've just gone through was traumatizing, but how you choose to respond to the trauma is I think what's best about how adults are able to kind of grasp the concept of, okay, something bad just happened, but I can respond differently. I don't necessarily have to respond in worldly ways, whereas some people do fall into bad habits of alcoholism or they fall into drug addiction, unfortunately, and instead choose something healthier for you to deal with the trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you're talking about is what we call harm reduction in my field. Is you can do. No one comes to my office and is like, I wave a magic wand. I build relationships with people. I give them a safe space to practice the choices and understanding, like, oh, what's going into this particular decision I'm making about my life. If I reacted this way, what's the next best step? Shout out to Frozen 2 for that life lesson. Again,
Hey.
didn't learn it in a master's program. You're not going to learn, like, those are just, they're giving you information. But I went into those programs with unhealed grief from losing a parent at a young age, being overstimulated and overweight as a manifestation of that overstimulation, because attention deficit disorder presents differently in women. You know, like not knowing what we didn't know in the early 90s. Did I go into this profession? I landed and I'm like, oh, if I hadn't paused and been like, I know I got to do more. If I hadn't like chosen some random stuff for my life, then I wouldn't be able to be here and hopefully make an impact with, you know, what I'm saying, to help people understand, like, it's not what's happened to you. Even if there's some jacked up stuff that should have never happened to you. I don't want traumas, you know, and there's some pretty gruesome things that I've been exposed to. But understanding how you can detach in a healthy way from those versus trying to dissociate from them, and they are a part of you, and you have to integrate that in order to optimize effectiveness and choices.
Ooh, good point. And you know, that's something I learned along my journey, right? Because people go through things, right? And unfortunately for the presumed victim in that story right there, we'll have to do what you said and find that way to detach from that and learn how to heal from it. Even if it's because I picked up on a point earlier, right? To where you had mentioned something about when you said it's third degree rape, right? To where it's kind of like more one of the minor offenses. I don't know legal jargon like that, right? To where you said something along the lines of that may indicate how the news got out, right? And I'm wondering that if news got out from the way I said I would have done it, just bragging and some way it made its way up. But and maybe I'm putting myself back in that young boy mindset of maybe at that point in time he doesn't know what's wrong yet, right? Because I'm putting myself back in that age. I'm like, what's wrong? I'm cool with it, right? How do you, I guess, how do you address that? Like if because if that boy is anything like me at the younger ages, I'm like, but that's okay. I was okay with the mayor doing that, right? How do you start that process to kind of like undo that mindset, right? Because I had it. I'm gonna tell you right now, and it when back then it had nothing to do with power. I didn't know anything about power. She was just fine. It's beautiful, right? So just learning along my way. I mean, back then we knew it was wrong, right? It was just one of those things like, man, we said that if it ever happened, knowing that it wouldn't, right? Because she just wasn't like that. But in this situation, it turns out the mayor was. So that's a challenging situation. But back to the original question is, how do you, I guess, re-educate or help someone learn that no, that's actually wrong?
It is a big question. I'll go ahead and do my best with it because I can't necessarily say, you know, the individual person. I don't know. We don't know the willingness. We don't know a lot about this person's history.
Yeah, we're missing a lot of info.
We're missing a lot. So just set the tone there, because this is not about making decisions about whether guilty or not. That's up for a court of law. At least that's not for me. It's up for a court of law, whatever happens. But I will say this is such a common issue that I can't say confidently that you can prevent it. I think this is probably an exact scenario where a lot of the issues that we have today with just the power dynamics between male and females, like in society, stem from having primary sexual encounters that people did not realize were inappropriate.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. And then I want to add to what you said. I want to kind of articulate kind of what you said, right? Because I had a couple of different examples, right? I like to look at stuff from both sides of the coin. I shared my example from the young boy perspective, right? Now, because again, if it had been a man, I feel like it would have been a lot more outrage to it, right? But then also too, something else I noticed back in grade school and high school, right? I even when R. Kelly broke out, right? And everyone was all mad at R. Kelly. I'm like, well, wait a minute. when I was in junior high, I remember there was some girls that I wanted to holler at. They didn't want me. They wanted the high school boys, right?
Mhm.
And I remember seeing some girls waiting after school, and you know, an older guy from high school would come pick them up, right? And I didn't have a chance when I was in high school. Same thing. I'm trying to holler at, you know, some girls. They're like, nah, nah, nah. I got me a college boy. College boy got a car. I'm on the bus. I couldn't compete with that, right? Or not even a college guy, just a grown man. And while I'm sitting at the bus stop, I'm seeing, you know, girls waiting for grown men to come pick them up, and these are their boyfriends, right?
Mhm.
So I'm kind of looking at it at two different sides of that coin. To your point of maybe those scenarios is what you said, just being exposed to something that they didn't know was wrong. Um, but at the same time, too, I'm kind of like, do you have young people kind of setting a trap and not realizing they're setting a trap?
So, yes, I think there are things that we can do about it. I just don't think we're able to prevent. And that's why I sit on the side of like, I am pro prevention, but I also leave room for there's life has to happen in order for us to respond to things that happen and actually get a different lesson out of it.
Yeah.
It's, I guess, my own way of representing you can't change the past, but the past can also influence the future. And you have to know the past in order to change the future. So this is where it's like I get a little triggered by people say, just forget the past. The past is the past. You can't. I'm like, we got to look at it because it does influence, and mostly not
Yeah.
because you can change it, but because of bias. And it's mostly the emotional bias of people not understanding, like, because I'm not going to guarantee you this, but I would, nor place a bet, but I would bet if you were to ask someone who experienced what this, and we also don't know if it's a male or female
They didn't specify.
subject, yes, but
Well,
they probably would not consider this a traumatizing event, right?
Good
This would
point.
not. So they don't like, not that they don't want to understand what trauma is, but they've who really knows the impact of what experience at that age has on your brain and your formative understanding of the world, to realize, like, and to consider that, oh yeah, that was actually stressful, because it's usually in during this time that people are realizing it's actually impactful to them because they lost something. People don't perceive it to be traumatic until it's done and over and there's a consequence to it.
Yeah. Huh.
And they realize it. So that's where it's like, you can't really prevent trauma from happening, but you can teach people, the youth especially, that, hey, if these situations make you feel this way, and teach them about what they're experiencing in terms of feelings. They did, at least from my recall, they stopped telling me about feelings in like third grade. Most of these situations happen when you get to middle school and high school, because that's when that scenario you just talked about of like, oh, the cute guy is going to like you and you should just do anything that he says because it feels good. Not every heroin feels good too, and you shouldn't do that all the time. Like, no. And so understanding the pain pleasure principle at an earlier age, I think, is probably, at least that's what I'm advocating for in my work, is teaching the youth what does wrong really mean. And I understand that it's just like, yeah, wrong is wrong, but that's also why I don't do small talk well, because I'm like, well, wrong has a lot of personal associations based off of the culture of that family upbringing. We all say like child abuse is wrong, but if you grew up in a family where you got physically abused, it wasn't that wrong. That's why there's carries over into generations, so when we have to open up these I think I see a lot of conversations happening, but we also have to realize the impact of that, positive and negative. It's good for healing, but it also can be a lot of information that people don't know how to process, and they're just exposed to their own stress and their own trauma, because maybe it actually happened to them and they're not equipped to deal with it, but their brain locked it away, because that's what your brain does, is protects you and wants you to be efficient and well, but it actually is quite of a maladaptive response because you don't have the understanding of neuroscience when you're like 4.
Yeah. We got a comment on Instagram from Unstoppable Season. He said, I know I'm getting old, because if you asked me when I was 15, I would be high-fiving my homeboy, but at 43, I'm like, throw the book at her. LOL. Nah, I mean, we're the same age, Unstoppable season. Same, like I go back to them, like, dude, you got the mare. But now at this age, I'm like, no, that's disgusting. That's definitely disgusting.
That's because you've matured
I've
mentally and you're
matured.
able
Yeah,
to
yeah.
grasp that concept of what is truly wrong.
Yeah. Hey, we getting old, Unstoppable season. Just accept it.
You're not that getting that old. I
By the
promise
day,
you.
sir.
I'm still trying to pass my 38, but so I think did you have anything else before we wrap this topic up, Bobby? Because I got a closing thought on something Sarah said that I want to leave off at before we move to the next topic.
No, I think Sarah covered it pretty well.
So just to translate it, or wrap it up, it's something I understand. It's you hit something very hard because I'm still as a father concerned. How do we prevent this, right? You said something. I think as parents, because we can't rely on schools to do it, right? We got to parent. Keep working with our children to teach them how to deal with their feelings and emotions. Good. When you said that, I'm like, oh yes, I love that. Don't let these phones raise these babies. You raise these babies, man. And have these conversations with them and let them know, hey, you might be feeling like this because of this. Just get it out, right? Especially, I would say boys, right? I think even when I was younger, I feel like, especially my generation and maybe the generation before me, Gen X, like I remember they used to always tell us, you're not supposed to cry, you're a boy. If you cry, you're a girl and stuff like that. We need to do better with that. It's okay to cry, get it out. Right? So teach these kids how to deal with their feelings and their emotions. So thank you for that.
Can I just say it was a great closing statement, but can I just add something real quick?
Go ahead.
So, because if you're not quite right, because that requires a lot of parenting to help younger versions of yourself. Like that's partly why I, thank God, don't have my own biological children yet, and I'm able to help people manage this. But this is partly why therapy exists. Therapy is also a big commitment, and so if you happen to have a lifestyle that's built around and it's pretty stressful and you don't feel like you can even process your own emotions because no one ever taught you how to help your children learn their emotions, starting with yourself, doing that. Yeah, like that. There's a couple, as soon as I think I'm like, oh yeah, that's the deepest it can go, I talk to someone else and I'm like, dang, there's really some more deep stuff out here that I don't even really realize. Is that so that you have to slowly kind of put out on the timeline how you introduce and expose yourself to what emotions are. Also, a shameless plug here is that I've created a course to help try to people and taper that workout for people. So if you can't go to therapy for whether it be insurance reasons, cost reasons, I've tried to put this information in a sequence of and a pattern that slowly exposes you to what realizing and being more mindful about this experience of emotions is, because then you'll be able to help your children a little bit more understand and deal with their emotions. And it's not just as easy to just do it and get it done.
No, good point. And we'll get all the information from you too. Put it in the description below on YouTube for my YouTubers out there. Excellent point, because I feel like I'm pretty good hands-on as a father, but I've done a lot of work. I've gone to therapy several times to help with that, because long story short, I've had emotional like issues being able to tap into my emotions and express feelings and stuff like that. But it's been a journey, right? To your point, which I did get that help. I did get that work. And my fellas, it's okay. We got to do it, man, because we got to be here for the kids, man. We can't let these women do it on themselves, man. Good point. Thank you. Say what now?
Men's mental health is imperative. Like,
yes.
Not gonna say y'all are behind, but you a little bit behind.
I mean, I can admit to that. I can admit to that.
Not everyone, but I think men are easy. They're sponges in my comparison to like my female clients, but you have a lot more to break through in terms of social stigma, I think, than women have.
Yeah. I mean, excuse my French, but it's I don't know if you've seen those memes where it'd be like, yeah, black people laughing at you for drinking water. Like, he drinking water. I don't know if you've seen those memes. A lot of our culture is like that. Like, he's going to get therapy. That dude is a simp. Like, we're bad with that. We got to stop doing that. because
Yeah.
the kids need us, to your point, right? And we can't help them if we can't help ourselves. So,
At the end of the
excellent point.
at the
Go
end of
ahead.
the day, just simply is to be the best version of yourself, be the best role model and example for the girls that you can be, because whenever you're not, when that foundation of what a male role model should be in their lives um, isn't there, they're going to end up being attracted to people who are crappy, and we'll talk about that kind of when we move into the red flag um, segment. But it's the same thing, that women will often reach out to men that treat them badly because they don't know any better. And if you have a good example of what a father is, then your children are less likely to be attracted to people who will treat them bad.
Good
So
point.
be the best
Good
you
point.
can be for them.
I like it. Now that was a good way to start off the new format. Thank you, ladies. That was good. So we about to move to the next topic. We're gonna talk about how Disney is shady. I'm talking shady. Let me go ahead and cue this up. And again, and I'm gonna say this real quick before I play it. Thank you everybody out there. We weren't gonna cover this topic, but I got messages from WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook. People were like, man, y'all gotta talk about this. So hey man, we're here for the people. So we're gonna go ahead and play this one and then we'll have a conversation about it.
Do without even reading them. Disney is trying to use them to fend off a wrongful death lawsuit. A man in New York is suing the company after his wife suffered a deadly allergic reaction at a restaurant at Disney World. But Disney, for its part, is saying he cannot sue because he agreed to arbitrate any disputes with the company when he signed up for a free trial of Disney Plus in 2019. Joining me now is Amy Feldman. She's a lawyer and author. Amy, it's good to see you again. So first off, anyone listening to this might say, what on earth does Disney Plus have to do with this? A restaurant that was at Disney World. And what does it mean exactly to arbitrate a dispute?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, Ziglar. First of all, most people don't know what binding arbitration is or what the problem is when they sign up for those terms and conditions, which, as you said, most people don't even read. Binding arbitration means that if you have a dispute with the other party, you don't get a trial by jury. You don't get to speak before your peers about why they owe you money. Instead, you have to go with a neutral arbitrator, and it's binding. So if you don't like what the arbitrator has to say, you don't have the opportunity to appeal
Ooh.
it.
So were you familiar with that story, Sarah?
I was actually. I try to listen to my news through the form of like podcasts, just because I'm not overly exposed to all the stimuli, all the words. I don't think y'all realize just how dysregulated just that one clip can cause people. So just breathe, because there's a lot. You're processing information. Anyways, the answer to your question was yes, I've been familiar with that story.
Who's gonna kick us off?
Well,
I always got something to say, Bobby, so go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's okay. No, we talked about this a little bit on Friday because we discussed this during a meeting about Disney being very shady in their policies, and just because you accept the terms and conditions on accepting content from a digital platform, does that really excuse you from something happening physically on one of your properties? This kind of goes into people not reading terms and conditions, which we've talked about before too.
We've
And people
said
now,
that so many times, people aren't reading.
we're over here just yes, accept, because
Mhm.
nobody's
I'm
reading.
guilty of
but
it. I'm guilty of it.
yeah, I mean, does that really give Disney the give them the upper hand to be able to pass that buck onto back onto that individual? I think that there should have been some more carefulness kind of happening in whichever kitchen the cooking took place and whatever else happened, because I imagine when you're eating somewhere, you can let your server know that, hey, you're allergic to something, and they could do everything in their power to make sure that whatever they serve in their restaurant isn't going to necessarily come near your food. Who's truly at fault here? And at the end of the day, Disney's just trying to pass it off, saying because you accepted terms and conditions on being able to watch, Mickey Mouse, that all of a sudden, this is going to excuse them from everything. no, Disney, no.
So in Unstoppable Season, he's there with you. Said, "Oh hell no, Disney! I'm canceling my Disney Plus if he doesn't get justice." Hashtag boycott Disney. Now, it hits home with me because I have allergies. I'm allergic to shellfish. I'm allergic to gluten, and I'm allergic to bananas. Right. So, from what I understand, they told the waitress or waiter at the establishment they were at, and I guess carelessness. And then she passed away. Right. So a couple of things. If you read the whole story or watch the whole video, I didn't understand the arbitrary thing either until they explained it in this video, and I'm like, ooh. Legally, and I'm not a legal professional. We have someone that's done some time in the legal world, right? They covered their tails. So the fact that they kind of had the foresight to throw that in there, it reminds me of economics, right? There's no such thing as a free lunch. I took the free trial for Disney Plus, right? I didn't read nothing, right? So that goes to that question: who's at fault? Are we mad at Disney because they covered their tracks and did their due diligence? It was like, haha, I'm gonna get this to you for free. No such thing as a free lunch. Yeah, I'll put it there for you to read, but you didn't read it. You get what I'm saying?
But does that excuse them from something happening at one of their theme parks? Let's take this wrongful death aside from it being an allergy. Let's say that somebody didn't do their due diligence and clipped somebody incorrectly on a roller coaster, and somebody flew off and passed away. Should Disney be at fault for that? Yeah, they should. But then you tell me, if somebody signs up on the, and they accept the terms and conditions, and all of a sudden Disney's like, oh, now our hands are up and you can't ever do anything to us. You can never sue them for anything that they wrongfully do. Is there a way for that to actually happen?
I think there is, but it does tend to come towards the legal system being a little bit more reformed than I think it is. And then also this not being a huge corporate conglomerate that has a lot of significant power in where legal systems intersect with the best interests of the parties. That was a long, really way of saying that big words and a lot of mumbo jumbo in legal formats can easily get confusing. And then also, this is again another example of an activating detail as to trying to place blame and getting people to be mad at Disney, and then also like provoking fear that gives people no response to how to not get out of survival fear mode. So as a business owner and someone who has failed in trying to scale businesses before, I see the point of having NDAs, disclosures, things that protect your business. Disney employs a lot of people, and they set an environment for people to enjoy life outside of this one particular negative event. That by no means am I advocating for Disney to get off on this, because I do still think that they're responsible, because someone's life was lost at your in your environment, things that you were exposed to, and that there is a responsibility for, which is why I don't really use the word fault or blame much, because they both have responsibilities here. Geronimo, I would say, as a person who has allergies, what is one thing that you always carry with you?
So mine isn't bad to the point I have to have an EpiPen. But I know a lot of people do. My reactions are intestinal. It'll run its course without being given TMI. But
thank you for that.
You're welcome.
But no, you knew the association, which I only bring up because in the court of law, that's where they're going to try to defile the plaintiff, I believe, is the victim of this is like, oh, she should have been prepared. There's a truth to that.
Yeah, good point.
There is. It's not negating it. That doesn't necessarily mean Disney has no fault, no responsibility. But as a big business, this particular scenario is pretty in line with reading the terms. But me as a mental health professional, what I pick out from just that point is, why aren't we reading the terms? And I'll relate this to a bigger issue. A bigger issue from a mental health perspective, which is why I'm stepping out of like my little closed door office, whatever this little space is, because I don't think people realize just how impactful this mental health crisis is. It's not just since COVID. This is a long-standing history of not being able to process information effectively, which is why you're seeing an increase in diagnoses of attention deficit disorder, an increase in diagnoses of spectrum disorder, is because people have gone so long without understanding how their brain works and the information that wasn't necessarily provided to us. If you want to be mad at someone, be mad at the person that didn't teach you about yourself or give you the accountability to teach you about yourself. But can't really do that because they did tell us that at a very young age. Worry about yourself.
Yeah.
Not mind your business, but that is a nice little rendition of it. But it is understand, take care of yourself, invest in your health. I didn't do it for the longest time. And if I can only catch one person to say, hey, pay attention to why you're not reading I don't read those things. I probably would fall right into this lawsuit if I had something bad to me happen at Disney, because I did have a free trial of Disney Plus. Cool. My options are out the window, but that's big business protecting itself and a lot of other people who depend on Disney to stay in business.
Yeah, good point.
Before you want to be mad at someone, learn what your relationship with anger is.
I'll tell you what, you and Unstoppables, no, this was Creative Native. You guys on the same frequency. Creative Native said we as Americans are just lazy. Technically, you can't sue an amusement park for dying on a ride. Read the back of the ticket. So they put the information there. I'm going to take an educated guess that there's some kind of disclaimer saying, hey, you accept this risk, right? It's kind of like a waiver when you buy the ticket is what it sounds like.
And an informed consent when you go to therapy.
There you go. So there's a couple of details that are in the story, right, Bobby? It was mentioned in there that Disney, they're smooth with this too, right? They said that restaurant wasn't a Disney-owned restaurant. Like it was, I think it's like a third-party vendor that's just on the facility, the property. So because they say, so that not us, it's that restaurant, those owners. And even if you did try to come after us, by the way, this is the arbitrary agreement they agreed to when they had Disney Plus free trial. So they like kind of double protected themselves, right? So we're like, that ain't us, that's them. And then even if you do try to come after us, this arbitrary. And then I kind of it's kind of like one of those things to where like it's not like let's say if they wanted to not only go after that restaurant and then go after Disney, they're not saying you just can't come after us. You just won't get it your way. It's just going to be whatever our arbitrary person that we presented, and they're going to lay out the terms and they're going to make you an offer you can't refuse because you did the free trial of Disney Plus. That's basically what they're saying. My takeaway from this is read. We've been saying that. Read. And I gotta kick myself in the butt too and stop just click.
Well, if I would remind you, not only read, but this is where it gets overwhelming very quickly, and why people just, if anything, knowing how to regulate your stress response will help immensely with that. But now it becomes another crisis issue because we are in a literary crisis in this country. We have some of the lowest reading rates. And a lot of, I'm not going to blame all technology because we wouldn't even be having this conversation without technology. So thank you. But technology is a discriminating factor in a lot of why people aren't reading. Everything is literally at just a click. It's instant gratification. So if we do not make the conscious choice to slow our brain waves down, slow our processing down, learning the human experience as to what influences even how we make decisions about information, then you reading that, be like, oh yeah, cool, I read it. It's not gonna be a problem until it's a problem. Yeah.
Good point. That the literary issue, it's scary how bad it is.
That's a lie. Those are real books. They're not just for show. And I have read them recently. But I even listened to
It does make your background look good though.
Thanks. I'm trying to make it. But I do identify with attention deficit disorder, which is why I have to be very mindful when I get passionate about this. I talk faster. I'm stressing myself out and potentially someone else listening to this because I'm just quick. It's a condition. I've had to train myself to slow down, to understand all the intersections just as my own human, because attention deficit disorder is not just information. It's sensory processing. It's your relationship with food. Do you have a stable and emotional, secure attachment with yourself? It's a lot of different things. And a lot of people are still kind of uncovering it. We're in an awakening time where people are like, oh yeah, information, that makes sense. Diagnosis, oh, that's me. And then get stuck because they think they see it literally in their families as soon as you know you're an alcoholic, what do you do about it?
Exactly.
Nothing.
And I'm on that same struggle bus with you. I also have ADHD. For one of my things, right? If you give me too many options, my brain shuts down. I don't know if I showed you my calendar, Bobby, but I'm on a very regimented schedule that I put myself on as a way to control it. That's the way I found to be able to handle life. Basically, like every hour of the day for me is allocated to an activity. Even reading. Like if I have to read something, there's a time slot that I have. It's called time blocking. That's allocated just for that. But because I am ADHD, I start thinking about random stuff. I'm reading about business accounting, and I'm thinking about Dave Chappelle doing something in Austin for some odd reason. I don't even know why. Right? I'm like, what? Well, then I got to go back and read what I just read like 10 times for it to sink in. Right? And then if I'm reading a book, I got to get the audio book so I can hear it that way too, just to get it to sink in. So I think we deal with it our own different ways, right? But to your point, if you realize you're an alcoholic, what are you gonna do about it, right? You can't just let it own you. Good point though. Whatever we need to do to get control of our habits and why we don't read, I share this. I remember this one time I got pulled over when I was stationed in California, got a ticket. I was brand new to the area, and I was like, man, I didn't even know that stop sign was there or something, right? And he was like, you know what, son? Ignorance isn't bliss. So whatever we got to do, it's not. It's like, hey, you still broke the law. You getting this ticket. Judge not gonna try to hear it either, and she wasn't. So, because I try to get that off my insurance. But yeah, whatever it takes, right? Figure it out. What is it? It's throw your handle out there. So if folks need some help, let them get in contact with you, Sarah.
Oh, sorry. That was for me. So I have a couple different ways. Googling that would actually help me immensely. SARAWILDER. I'm centralized out of North Carolina, so you'll find my website there. All my socials are linked there. But my main social is right_perspective. Now, it does specifically kind of focus on the relationship with food right now because I focus on building the recovery, and a lot of people need to integrate safety, and mostly with their relationship with food. That's kind of the common denominator when we're talking about recovery from mental health and addiction. So that's why I focus on that right now. But I do put a lot of content out there to try to help prompt people just start paying attention to how things are happening in their own lives and how you can cope with it a little bit better. Just because not everyone needs to go to therapy. I'm gonna be honest with you. As a therapist, not y'all just get comfortable talking about your stressful situations, and I'm just not willing to be that therapist to let y'all believe that everyone needs therapy. No, but we have different versions and perspective of therapy in our own lives. But you have to be curious about the topic in order to really effectively say, like, okay, you're doing the work.
Yes. It's a couple of things, right? And this is going to get us to the next topic. So we met when I was ending my military career in North Carolina, been friends ever since. And the last therapist I saw was in North Carolina, Fort Bragg, which is now Fort Liberty. There you go. There you go. All the way, right? There you go. She gave me a lot of tools, man. The therapist that I had that helped me a lot to where I'm in a solid relationship, right? Which I would not have been able to get into until I was able to do the work to become better, which it actually helped me detect red flags. When trying to decide a partner to date, right? So topic we're going to cover are dating red flags. But I want to read this comment real quick. We got on IG. We actually got a couple of them. Creative Native. He said, in the world where we live in, you have to CYA, cover your ass, for anything and everything as a business. Folks have sued fast food chains for becoming fat. Shaking my head. That was to an earlier point you were making, Sarah. And then he also said sports played a minor role in helping me combat ADHD as a kid, and coaching does now as an adult. That's my brother. So it runs in the family. Just just wanted to throw that out there. But thank you, Creative Native. And now back to the topic. We're gonna talk about dating red flags, and I'll let you open us up with that, Bobby, because this was one of the topics you gave us. So the floor is yours, ma'am.
Okay. Last week I had mentioned that one of the things that our church does is put on a it's a class. We put it on for the young ladies and young men that are in part of our youth at our church. So from 6th grade all the way up until 12th grade, they're able to join this group. It's a 12-week class, and they go through how to identify red flags in relationships, because some of the kind of, kids make mistakes when it comes to dating people, and being able to identify what obsessiveness looks like, what even knowing some of their families, if they come from families where everybody's an alcoholic or people are drug addicts and stuff, what are the possibilities that they fall into this same type of those same type of actions. And so my daughter went to it. I am a girl mom. I have 5 girls. I have 1 boy. So I have a total of 6 kids, and I own 2 businesses. I am in the Army Reserves. I work for the Air Force doing IT cybersecurity. So I've got, just a little bit of experience in what this is like. And I wish that I've been able to, I wish I had something like that at that age, because I didn't. I just was attracted to everybody who was abusive to me because I was so used to being bullied. And so I was like, oh, this person's mean to me, so they must like me. Right. And so my daughter's 15, she's a sophomore, and she went to it twice. And she was telling me that she liked this one boy at her school. And she said, but she figured out that he had some red flags in the way he talked to other girls. Not so much talk to them as like in like a flirtatious manner, but just being ugly towards them. I said, well, what makes you think that you won't be the next person just because you think he's cute? That doesn't mean that he's a good person. And being able to figure out now at that young age, don't get yourself involved with somebody so quickly without knowing, some of their background and some of their history, because knowing that might, help you make a better decision with your relationship moving forward.
I love that. You are like the definition of like the empowered woman, mom, professional, business. Yes, get it, girl.
Yes,
that's awesome. I just want to give you that before I like dive in, because I think what you're trying to unpack here is, it's a lot. And again, my opinion is not the end all be all. I can just share it based off of the perspectives that I've been influenced by, my own as well as professionally. I think the biggest barrier for this, since you brought up youth specifically with red flags, being an adult and having red flags is a whole different situation, but they're very similar, is right now I think we have the youth, their disadvantage is that they have way too much information about emotions.
Yes.
They're completely saturated about, the pendulum. I talk about the pendulum swinging a lot, and, I see it in generations, just experiences, people try new things. Right now, the younger generation, what is this, Alpha Gen or Gen Zers, they are growing up with knowing having very easy access to information and answers. So they're going to struggle more with attention deficit disorder and potentially addiction if they don't understand the implication of just how fast information's processing, let alone how they decide on it. I also think I mentioned this earlier in terms of like not being able to prevent trauma. I don't think red flags, you're not preventing them. They're supposed to be investigated. They're supposed to help you start paying attention, to slow down. That's why red lights are red. We associate them to
I
stop.
love it.
Slow down.
Yeah.
Investigate it. If your relationship is moving too fast, that's a big red flag, but you're also implicated in you being the general person subject we're talking about. I'm notorious for this. I love and I love hard. Be like, okay, I'm gonna love him. I'm gonna love them. That is fast. That is a lot of misconceptions. That's a lot of information from an individual, let alone what's being reinforced in being around your peers who have so many emotions that they're just sharing, and you're being a support system for them and being exposed to other people's fastness. And I don't mean just sexualized fastness. I just mean thinking.
Yeah.
Just feeling, thinking, believing, let alone trying to make a decision about what is a valuable experience for you. And I say valuable intentionally because I think the only thing for like parents, but then also, you know, how we start to change and bend the cycle into something a little bit more stable is we have to model what values look like. They don't have to all be the same. By no means are we all supposed to be. There's a reason we all look different here. There's a reason we have different experiences, but values are what align us, and they're also what create intention and impact in our society. And so when we look at like not only just teaching your children values, but how to align with them, they're going to naturally grow. That's why youth, I think they do have to go through some toxic relationships to realize. The hope is that they realize earlier is like, oh, that's not supposed to be the norm.
Yeah.
That's not supposed to be. I was very introverted, very shy. I did not have a lot of social exposure to relationships at an early age, nor did I have a parental figure that could model what a man is supposed to treat me like. So I didn't really pay attention to this until my late 20s, early 30s. And I'm only 35. I'll tell on myself. That's part of vulnerability. Like, I'm still learning some of that.
Yeah.
And you're going to continue to learn that. But if it wasn't for my profession prompting me to pay attention to what I was being told about, like, oh, acceptance and commitment therapy is very values oriented, very mindfulness oriented, I wouldn't have like, oh, I don't feel effective in my professional role because I'm not actually paying attention to myself. And then that turned into like, oh, how do I value myself? By just eating everything I want to at the end of the day?
Good point.
No. So it takes a lot of work. I don't think there's a lot of preventing it, but values and curiosity about understanding the human experience will help immensely in trying to just navigate other people's red flags, because I can tell you they're blaring. They're also quite attractive. They have nice smiles. They have pretty eyes, and they say nice things.
Yep.
And sometimes they even give you gifts and money, and with the power dynamic and how that can go awry very quickly.
Yep.
I think wanting to establish the foundation of what red flags look like in our youth so that they can take what they've learned and begin to apply that as they get older. I think there's going to be some special stipulations though, where like, I can only speak to my daughter's case where, she does have what a healthy, relationship and marriage and what our home values are, on top of learning red flags, so that when she does get to that age where she does want to be in a committed relationship, my hope is that she's had some foundation before she makes that decision, and I'll be here to help kind of guide her into that. While I won't be able to protect her from all those things, my hope is I could try to give her some good perspective and guidance along the way, so that she doesn't come into some of the scary and abusive relationships that I've been in. So because of my trauma, I make different decisions to help prevent future trauma.
Absolutely. Geronimo, I know I'm going to cut you off, but I got to say something before.
Go. Hey, you the guest. Go ahead.
I got two things. You bring up that I missed a solid point, which is what can you pay attention to? And I'll get to that. But I also want to say, for you, you're not supposed to do it all by yourself. That doesn't just mean that you have your co-parent, your husband, but this is where, like, as a community, you getting like your kids are going to be okay if you learn to trust yourself and in turn trust the environment and the support systems that you have, because no parent is perfect. No two parents together is going to catch everything. And this is where, like, it's going to be an external resource, something that you can't control. And I know that scares the crap out of parents. It scares the crap out of me, because I just have clients and a cat. And so I'm like, I want to control everything. And really the answer is learning how to cope with the discomfort of what you can't control.
Yeah.
So I commend you on that.
Yeah. That's perfect. My husband says that too. He's like, I think you get uncomfortable because you know that there's some things out of my control that I truly can't control, and it disturbs me a lot.
It disturbs me for you, girl. I'm like, that's a power to you with as much, because even in business, I learned that life lesson, and I still have to figure out how to apply it when I have children. is the things that you can't control. I'm glad I did it this way because that will be my preparation. But there's still things like I'm not going to know what's going to happen in the moment with a screaming child at me that I can't just be like, here, it's not mine. You can have it back now. Okay. So the second I was going to change or as mentioned was what are some of the things like from a personality trait and or behavior, because I am a behaviorist at the end of the day. I pay attention to how people's patterns move and the associations there. So I'd say one of the biggest indicator now with some investigation, but not too much investigation, is rigid behaviors. People who do not bounce back, they hold grudges, they are extremely reactive with no accountability. I'm not saying that all reactive people are some things you have to stay away from, but you need to watch how they respond if they're held accountable. So for this is where we're dyads, right? We mirror each other. So a reactive person is naturally going to potentially attract an unreactive person. So an unreactive person is also just as susceptible to becoming a reactive person. This is where all my empaths, it's not an excuse anymore. You need to learn boundaries. Is that you have to understand that you absorb all of that energy. Eventually you're going to blow too. It just tends to be more implosive than explosive. So people who walk on eggshells, and I was a super shy person who walked on eggshells. Guess who can be the biggest butthead in the world if I'm not paying attention to my energy levels and what I'm exposed to?
Yeah.
Okay. So people who are just explosive is not I look at, no offense to the school shooters, but like none of the school shooters were super explosive people.
No.
They were very implosive, quiet people. It's the quiet ones that you kind of have to kind of be a little cautious with because they are internalizing a lot more. And unfortunately, it is not, I just feel like it is on my spirit to say, but it is not your responsibility to change anyone. You cannot do it. Trust me, I have tried, even as a person in power, to help influence and change people. You have to let someone else know who is more equipped to follow up and deal with that. And this is where we have to understand it's not being a snitch. It's not being disloyal to your friends if you tell them the truth or you tell someone else about their truth because you are like thinking they are going to hurt someone else or their others, because they will eventually. It may not be right now, but it will if you got that feeling, because youth are intuitive AF. They will tell you about themselves, and half the time they're right. We just don't want to hear it. Is that you guys have to trust yourself. It's not a bad thing to tell a person that you trust that has some potentially some impact to, if you have a bad feeling about someone's mental health, whether it be about someone else or like, I know it's hard, but please do it.
Yeah, no, 100%. Man, there was a lot. You had so many gems. I'm like, which one do I snatch?
I told you I was going to try to be concise, but
no, it's all good. It's all because you're giving us good stuff. And mental health is so important. But I think overall, we just as a society we undervalue how important it is. And like I said, I shared earlier, it helped me get to a better place in my life. Right. That's why I love having you on, and I will always advocate for it. You said something earlier, but it's been a recurring theme as far as the example, right? And even you told Bobby when you was like, hey, it's not just you. It's the family dynamic, but then it's also the village, right? That's one thing that I've always thrown out there is like we need to get back to being a village, man. Like and you even threw out accountability. I think cancel culture has kind of, it's an oxymoron, right? Because it's like cancel culture will hold someone accountable for breaking that group thought, but then it makes it wrong to call people out and make them accountable at the same time. I'm like, because it's like you want to hold other people accountable, but then at the same time, you're like, should I say something? I don't know. You got parents that are afraid to parent, right? Because they're like, man, I don't want my kids calling CPS on me. I come from a different clock. Call them. Because I also know that capital punishment is a thing, and there's levels and limits you can do as well. And I'll share this out there one day. We had a teenage daughter that wanted to test us. We called Popo. Popo came in and gave this teenage girl who didn't want to go to school a mouthful and let the girl know, right? The parents have certain limits of what they can do, right? Capital punishment within the constraints of the law, right? And I'm just sitting in the background like, you heard that, right? It came from the cops, so keep acting up if you want
we
to.
talked about this earlier. We got the same parenting style. So
Yeah, we got the same parenting style. But I say that to say, you gotta be hands-on, man. Gotta be hands-on. Like it can't be just mama, showing that example. It has to be daddy or whatever the dynamic is, right? Everyone has to help. Everyone has to help. Because you gotta know what good looks like to recognize the bad. And that's because I got caught up too. It's not just the women, right? When it comes to red flags, right? I think where I come from, I think we accepted toxicity, right? And here's the example of how we manifested it. She crazy as hell, but she fine in a motherfucker though. You know what I mean? Like we made it okay for a female to be
I talk about that
toxic.
all the time. Sorry, but women have gotten, it's not just women, but women have gotten away with a lot just because they're attractive.
Yep. But that was the conditioning I had to reprogram myself, right? To not accept toxicity just because she bad, right? That's something that's been plaguing, I would say, inner cities for a long time. And I didn't even, it took me well into my late 30s to really get past, I don't care how bad she is, it's not okay for her to be, for me, let me switch that, for me to accept being with a toxic person. You know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, I had to accept the fact that if I was ever with someone and it was a toxic relationship, that's on me because I chose to be with a toxic person. You know what I mean? And people will try to help you give yourself ways out and be like, no, but she shouldn't be. I'm like, well, the red flags were there, right? I knew she was toxic. I knew she was negative, but I stayed with her. That's on me. You know what I'm saying? I should have, maybe if I had a program like yours, Bobby, to learn that when I was younger, I could have avoided a lot of trauma, stress, pain, whatever, right? So, but I think it goes back to just as parents, man, we gotta, not as parents, we have to select a good circle, a good village, and like you said, trust that village to help. That's good though. That was really good.
Well, so let me add one more thing that's kind of like weaseling its way out of here in this is I think it's a barrier, but then it's also an action towards the solution. Barrier meaning a barrier to like us changing the problem. And that's connection. Connection looks very different, but we are so, I don't know if you guys have seen other headlines about the loneliness epidemic and just the lack of, I know y'all experience it because of your conscious individuals, but you see it in terms of people's behavior, in terms of like people's increase in irritability, the lack of desire, and cancel culture is a lack of connection to resolution. Like if we can't understand how to like not excise people, I understand, people being held accountable for their behaviors, but also making them excluded is not actually helping how we move forward.
Yeah.
It's just a delusion.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, oh, they're not part of the problem. They're sitting in prison and they're exposed to the officers who work in the prison and then have families at home and live this vicariously through just their exposure to the people that are behind cement walls. That's a whole nother topic for another time.
Yeah.
I digress back to my main point is what can help. What's the issue is the lack of connection. How do we get more connected? And that is at least my philosophy, but a lot of the research shows is you have to understand your own connection to yourself. We're so disconnected between screens, and that's not a bad thing. Like that's a good form of connection, but we're actually losing sensory perception by looking at you at a screen. All I've been doing is staring at myself and making sure my bangs don't fall in my face. Not all the time, but or I look at other people's, your environment, and then mind you, my brain I assess and I observe for a living. So it's like I have too much information about you already, just by based off of seeing into your personal world. So there's an issue with social media. It's helping connect affect us, but we have too much distorted information that actually pertains to us that makes it an issue of how do we actually connect with people in real life.
Good point. So connecting with ourselves as individuals, and that's part of learning how to recognize red flags in others and potential dating partners, huh?
Yeah, because you got your own red flags you got to figure out too.
Good point. Good. And again, I had to learn that through my journey, right? And I'll share a story on how I learned some of my red flags, right? I come from LA, and we may not be the nicest people coming from LA, especially South Central. But I had a lot of LA-isms, right? That I had, and I was dating someone that was from Alabama, and she would point stuff out that I just wasn't aware of. Because I mean, it's normal from where I come from, right? But then I read this book called How to Win Friends and Influence People, and I got to certain sections that were talking about how powerful words can be, right? And like literally, it was describing what she was telling me, and I was like, "Uh-oh, she's right." So I had to like realize, okay, um, first, I'm sorry. I did not realize that I was being a bad person to you. And words matter, right? To where I had to have, to your point, right, realize that I had red flags that I was just throwing out all over the place. But I had to own that and be like, you know what, you're right. I am an asshole. I need to stop. And then had to be open to that feedback to be like, what else am I doing? And then I'll read it in the book, confirm it. All right, I'm not gonna win friends if I'm acting like this, right? And it, so yeah, good point. We have to be able to take accountability. I had those red flags that I had to start controlling in order to, you know, attract the right person that maybe they're not red flag like lists. They still have red flags, but they're open to the feedback. Say, maybe we can work on this, right? This is what I did, you know, try to help not be this kind of way. Now I will say this because I've been on that journey and now I can detect the red flags. People aren't very welcoming when you address the red flags and be like, you know what? Hey, I think you could work on that. And I think we could be a tighter unit if you know we work on these red flags together. That where we've reached a point to where it's very hard to get that connection going, because if you try to say, hey, I noticed this, let's try to work it out. To your point, you said this. We're not really focused on the solution. We're more just it's just a problem. Now you're the problem. Now get out of here. You're exiled.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy.
Well, a lot of that, I think, you know, not to be the stereotypical therapist yet, but it forms when we were likely held accountable when we were younger for things that as children we didn't have that much responsibility for. So we were already modeled lack of accountability because it didn't feel good for our parents to displace their anger on us when it had nothing to do.
Yeah.
It's not ours, right? So that sets a lot of the tone for how that lack of accountability, you know, manifest in adult life. But accepting it is also very stressful. As much as I have trained myself to be like, oh yeah, I messed up, it still feels something.
Yeah.
I still feel something. We have to get out of this, not only just cancel culture, but the lack of like, oh, I don't care. I don't care. You are a human being.
Yeah.
And I need you to care. And I need you to learn what caring means with some protective factors and information that, you know, you deserve to have boundaries. But boundaries are things that people are going to cross, and they also tell you about where your boundaries are moving forward so you can work towards preventing those things, you know, from happening again, those red flags from being so alluring and attractive to you. But yeah, that connection, those conversations don't typically happen at Starbucks. You know, like when we're just grabbing coffee and, you know, updating people about our lives, they require more investment of it's really time. And just putting the time aside to really understand, like, what are you? What makes you up? You know a lot about yourself. I'm not here to tell you that you don't. I'm here as any therapist. If anyone therapist is telling you about yourself and labeling you and making you believe something about it that you don't truly, that's a red flag right there. Therapists got red flags out the yin-yang.
I see what you did there.
Like this diagnostic culture, like there is a whole, like that's actually like the first third of the treatment process is diagnosis. There are like 2/3 of the process of understanding when we talk about treatment. And I can lay those out in one of my content, but it's just like people keep getting stuck because it feels better to be labeled and to be not accountable, and understanding, accepting responsibility is a huge thing, but it is what sets you free.
It set me free once I took that accountability. So that's great. Give us a final thought to wrap this up with, Sarah. This was good convo. I'm gonna throw it out there. We didn't cover all the topics just because this got good. It got good. So but we can't keep everyone all night. We can't keep Sarah all night because she's serving a lot of people out there in North Carolina and around the world.
I'll be back.
Oh yeah, definitely. We gonna keep doing this. So give us a final thought, wrapping all of this up, moving forward.
I have a lot to say, but sometimes I just be like, ooh, I don't have much to say here. My final thought is, one is going to be, make sure you breathe with intention and hold your breath a little bit when you right after the inhale, because that will help regulate your central nervous system. It's kind of like my life advice for everyone.
I like that.
Inhale for 3, hold for 4, exhale for 5. All that as a resource is on my website. But my final thought really is like, if you're desiring change in your life because maybe you feel like you're stuck, you're at a crossroads trying to figure something out, that is such a normal experience because there's so much that can turn you around in this life and make you feel like you're lost. But I remind you, just like, trust, you're not that far off the path. Now, you're like actively in an addictive cycle with something, you may be a little bit of a stray, but you're not really that far off.
Okay. So for those that may think they're crazy, you're normal because we're all crazy, huh? That's how I interpret that.
Yep.
Woo! No, thanks a lot.
This presentation did not get discovered insanity. It did not. It was through tough mental processes and trauma and coming out to the other side. And I still got a lot of life to live. So,
yeah, same here. Well, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, you're gonna be a repeat offender over and over again because I like what you bring, and I like how you force us to think, because you had me taking some journeys. I'm like, man, okay, I remember that. So thank you. And again, before you sign off, let folks know how to get in contact with you one more time, because I'm seeing a bunch of people pop in on Instagram, and they're like, some of the things they're saying that they're really getting value from what you're sharing. So let them know how to get in contact with you one more time, please.
Okay. And just to finish before I do that contact, is just take it slow. You can just slow down just a tad. You'll have better results in your life. But get in contact with me. You can find me. So Google my name, Sarah Wilder, out of North Carolina. You'll find my website. You find my Instagrams. I do have a YouTube channel where I do a lot of just these kind of, honestly, they're just talks to myself, but to people, I'll go live, and I have a library of just topics that if you want to choose one, honestly, it probably is like a therapy session if you just reflect on the topic. So YouTube, website, and then what Instagram is that? My Instagram handle is on the screen, right_perspective, or Perspective Counseling PLLC on Instagram.
Boom. Thank you. And Bobby, you know what? We've never, since you joined this show, you never really threw out there what you have to offer, because you are also a business owner, entrepreneur. Let folks know what you're doing and tell them how to get in contact with you.
If you're in the San Antonio area and you're having issues with your home because of water damage or mold, you can get in touch with us through Patriot Restorations, LLC. We are a woman-owned business, disabled veteran-owned small business here in the state of Texas. And serving the three greater counties outside of San Antonio: Bear, Wilson, and Atascosa. So,
nice.
Yeah.
And then I'm Tech Von Go at Tech_Von_Go on all platforms except for TikTok, because I don't do TikTok. But everyone, IG, Facebook, YouTube, thank you for the love. Hey, Sarah, this has been a pleasure. Hopefully people get some really good vibes from this. We were getting some good feedback on IG, people saying that they love the new format. So, hey, y'all be safe out there. Y'all have a good night.
Peace.